read a book that you really like, is your immediate reaction to go get anything else that that author has written and read that? That seems like a pretty normal reaction, but I often wonder if the second book you read by an author, when you really, really loved the first one, can ever hold up, you know? So I've been reading modern literature for less than 2 years now. I only recently started, and I really wanted to read a vast variety of books at first to try to figure out what I actually enjoy reading and what my preferences are when we get out of classics. So I was trying not to read the same author too many times. I've been trying not to read series very much. And there's been some exception. For some reason, I've read several V.E. Schwab books. I've read several P.G. Wodehouse books because they're great, like, comedic relief in between, you know, darker or heavier stories. But mostly I have been kind of sticking to, like, one and done. But recently I've been thinking, hey, should I read some of my favorite authors again? I've already had some really big favorites among the many books I've been able to read in the last, 18 months or so. And, you know, if I really liked one of their books, maybe I'll really like all of their books, or maybe I won't. I'm interested to find out either way. So my goal for my next little section of reading, my next to-read pile, is to read a second book by authors whose first book I really liked. It's not necessarily the first book they've written, just the first book of theirs that I read I really liked. So I need to look through and find which authors I would consider fodder for this challenge. But before I even looked through, when I first had this idea, there were two names that immediately came to mind. One is, oh god, can I reach it? Haha, just barely. Barbara Kingsolver. I absolutely loved Demon Copperhead, probably one of my favorites. Well, yes, definitely one of my favorites that I've read in the last year and a half, whatever. And the only Barbara Kingsolver that I've currently read. The other name that came to mind is Mark Haddon, who wrote The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime. This is one that, like, I don't know, maybe it's because I saw the play first and then read the play script and then read the book, but, like, it didn't occur to my brain that he possibly has written more things until I just happened to, like, glance down a shelf at a bookstore and I was like, he's written more things. So because I just so happened to already be in a bookstore here that I really love, we have this, like, little chain of bookstores, used bookstores mostly, or they sell mostly used books, called The Open Book. There's like 5 or 6 locations in the LA area. And I just so happened to be in one the other day, so I went ahead and got myself the first 2 books from this challenge. I went ahead and looked to see what they had in the range of Barbara Kingsolver and Mark Haddon. A lot of people have recommended the Poisonwood Bible, or the Poisonwood Chronicles. Does it say in here? The Poisonwood Bible. A lot of people have recommended that I read that one, so that's kind of what I was looking for. But the joy of a used bookstore is that they don't always have exactly what you wanted. So they didn't have that. They had Barbara Kingsolver's Flight Behavior. So that's the one I'm gonna read. And then for Mark Haddon, who again I think has written numerous things, they had The Porpoise. I've got no clue with either of these. That's the thing, is like, when an author writes series and stuff, then it's like, well, yeah, I know what book 2 is gonna be like. But when they write standalone books, I'm always so enthralled because it's like, is the next book going to be similar? Do they always write the same kind of stories or sort of the same overall theme? Or is it just gonna be drastically different? And I think especially with this, The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime and The Porpoise, I have no clue. I do want a few more. I'm thinking maybe 5 total, so I need to look through my titles and see who else I should go dig through the bookstore looking for. Oh, you know what? This is an easy one. Toni Morrison. I've currently only read 1 book by her, Jazz, and I definitely want to read more. So I will go look for a second Toni Morrison book. I really liked The Ministry of Time, but if I recall correctly, that is her first and currently only novel. Ooh! The Heartbeat Library by Laura Mai Messina. I really, really liked, and I know that she has one other novel. I think she only has one, The Phone Booth at the Edge of the World. So it might be harder to find because there's only one other option, but I would love to read that. I've already read 2 Octavia Butlers, so she doesn't technically fall into this category. Anyone in here? Ooh, I really enjoyed Hamnet. I wonder if she's written anything else. Are you gonna tell me in the front of this book? Aha! There's a pretty long list by Maggie O'Farrell. So that'll be my 5th option. Messina, O'Farrell, and Morrison are who I'm looking for. And then we have Haddon and Kingsolver. I'm gonna go to the bookstore. I'm gonna take a picture of these so I don't forget that this is my list.
It's a good thing I took a picture, cause it's been 3 days, and I have completely forgotten which 3 books I chose.
They had one option for Maggie O'Farrell, This Must Be the Place. Surprisingly, just one option for Morrison, Paradise. Love removing all decision-making from my brain though. And unsurprisingly, no Messina. It was a long shot. I remembered that I have only read one Margaret Atwood book though, The Blind Assassin, so I'm switching to her for my 5th author to repeat, and despite the massive chunk that is Alias Grace tempting me, I ended up choosing the this one. Hi, I'm in a hotel. It's fine. But I finished Barbara Kingsolver's Flight Behavior last night, and I have thoughts. First of all, a kind of very, very random thought. This book made me aware of how incredibly fast some of our technological time periods have been. I was having so much trouble placing the time period of this book. It was written in 2012, and so I was like, I assumed the present. But then 2012 was like freshman, sophomore year of college for me, and so I was trying to go like, does this actually make sense? Because the characters have phones and laptops exist, but then nobody really has a laptop unless they're, you know, fancier. And then like clearly she doesn't have internet access on her phone. And then at one point she wrote phones slide. And I was like, oh my God, it was that brief period of time. Because it kind of went like the chunky block cell phones, and then we went from that to flip phones, right? And then wasn't there that brief period where we had like the little slide phones? And that kind of went straight into the first version of what we would now consider a smartphone, if I recall correctly. But I feel like the slide phone was such a brief period of history. And so it was just so interesting to be reading a book and be like, oh, it's from the slide phone era. And she does in the author's note at the end, she says that this would have taken place the winter of 2010 to 2011, actually. Anyway, as for the story, you know, it didn't grab me immediately the way that Demon Copperhead did. There was something about that book, like the first line, I was immediately like, oh my God, I'm in this. I found the writing so delicious and just easy to follow. This wasn't quite the same. It's definitely a slower story. It kind of takes a bit to get into it. And for a while at the beginning, I was kind of just left wondering like, what is this story? What is this about? Because I don't know yet. That being said, as the story develops, one, you're just given time to really develop an interest in these characters and an interest in what's going on. And even though it was slower and I wasn't necessarily as enthralled and in it as I had been with Demon Copperhead, there was never a point where I was like, oh my God, I'm bored out of my mind. I don't want to know. I don't care anymore. I still very much always wanted to keep reading. And the further I got in the story, the more I was hooked into it. By the end, which, by the way, I loved the way she ended this book, and I'm not going to tell you anything further about it. By the end, I was just like, oh my God. I don't know, I've felt things with that. But two, the further you go into this story, the more it becomes an incredible education on so many different topics. On motherhood, on Appalachia, and what it's like to live in rural Tennessee, on raising sheep and being in the wool business, on butterflies, monarch butterflies, on science and ecology in the environment in general. Like, so educational in an entertaining way. This is why I've always loved books that had some sort of educational element to them. Even when I was a kid, my favorite books were like the American Girl books, that I felt like I learned something real about the world while I was reading an entertaining story. And this one just, oh God, I was like, oh my God, she is so intelligent. Not necessarily that she already knew this, although I read the author's bio. She has like an extended one in the back of the book, so when I finished, I read that, and like, turns out Barbara Kingsolver has degrees in biology, which I find very unsurprising now that I've read this. But you know, she gives all these recognitions to the people who did research with her, who she did research through, I guess. So obviously it's not like, oh, she just already knew all of this stuff. But I feel like you can really tell like an intellectual author when you read a book. Somebody who was interested in a subject and found a way to give you their interest packaged in a novel, packaged in a fictional story, and that's just so cool to me. But yeah, I found the difference in the writing interesting, because at first I was like, oh, well, this was written in 2012, and Demon Copperhead was at least a decade longer, if not like 12 years, 13, not longer, in the future. And so I was like, oh, well, her writing has developed, and that's why it was so much more like grabby with that one. And then again, I read her bio in the back that had the list of everything she's written and was like, oh, she started publishing books in what, like 1993, I think it was? Oh no, 1988. And the Poisonwood Bible, which is so highly recommended, and what did it say? It was a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize, was published in 1998. So I definitely don't think that it's like, oh, well, this was one of her early books and she got better. Although, to be fair, everyone is always growing in their craft and growing in life experience, so like, we do still get better. So yeah, overall, I enjoyed it. The fridge is being loud right now, sorry. And I definitely want to read more Barbara Kingsolver now, like, real hard. Whew, y'all. Maggie O'Farrell knows how to tell a story. Also, I'm still in a hotel. Blasted through this pretty fast considering I was like doing a lot of stuff in the last few days. I think if I was at home reading this like normal, it probably would have gone even faster because, yeah, I really liked this one. She has such an incredible ability to just like fully encapsulate so many different POVs. And I did see this some in Hamnet because, of course, like, she starts that book from the perspective of a very young child. And in this one, she goes all over the place. So many different POVs, which is such an incredible way to tell the story. But on top of that, it's not even different perspectives. She also uses different, the word is escaping me right now, but like different writing styles, totally different ways of telling the story. I mean, she tells a chunk of the story with items. And if you're wondering, how do you tell a story with items in a written book? I'm not gonna tell you. You should read it. Yeah, I was definitely just absolutely, it says absorbing here on the cover. Somebody in PR said intensely absorbing. And yes, I would agree. It was so absorbing and it was so cool. It reminded me, I'm getting off track. But you know, like, not only is she using all these different POVs, but at one point she just like introduces a side character and tells you their whole story for just this little interaction they have with the main story, which hilariously reminds me of Les Mis, that massive, giant book. Part of the reason it's so massive is because the author, I can't remember his name right now, does this constantly. Like, you'll start a new chapter and he will just be fully giving you this entire backstory for this person, and you're like, who is this character? What is their place in the actual main story that I've been reading? Why am I getting to know everything about their life? And then in the end, it'll be like, they say one sentence to one of the main characters, and that's it. But you got to know their whole life. And there was a little chunk of this that reminded me of that, which I thought was really fun. It was like a modern version of it. Anyway, absolutely a yes. My takeaway from reading this one, This Must Be the Place, is just kind of that I want to read everything Maggie O'Farrell has ever written, because I am fascinated not so much in like what the stories are, but in what she can do. Like, I thought this one was cooler than Hamnet, y'all. Hamnet was really good, but I guess I'm really interested in the technical storytelling and writing side of books as well as the story itself, and this was so interesting in both directions. And so I'm like, what are all of her other books like? I want to know. I think I officially have an author. I mean, I think I said I wanted to read everything of Barbara Kingsolver too, but this one is even more so. I like really want to go read everything she's written. I'm enjoying this little challenge. Y'all, I did not see that coming, is what I was saying to myself every 10 pages of this book. I maybe would have seen more of it coming if I was better read in Shakespeare and or ancient Greek mythology. But yeah, this one threw me for a loop. Once I got the hang of kind of like what was going on here, it made me feel like someone had read, well, someone being the author, it made me feel like the author had read Shakespeare's Pericles and just been extremely angry about it. And this was his response, which I don't know that that's true. It sounds from his author's note in the back like he is also very well read in the Greek lore, the old Greek stories and everything, where Pericles originally comes from. And judging from his other book, which is a reworking of two mythical legends, I guess that's kind of what he does. But like, that's so different from and far from The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime, that this is the first author out of this group that if I did not know he had previously written that, I would never have guessed. Like the last two authors, I could feel a resemblance very strongly with Barbara Kingsolver because she writes about the same area, the same, I don't know, culture, I guess you could say. And then with Maggie O'Farrell, I guess you could say there's the relation of place, like she did use... there wasn't really a super big relation of place between the two books, but you could feel the similarity in her writing style, in her storytelling style. This one, yeah, this is the first one that I'm like, I would never have related the two if I didn't know ahead of time. That being said, I did enjoy this. It was a trip. I haven't read a lot of the like Greek reworking books that are kind of popular lately, I guess. I've seen a lot of them. I'm not even gonna list names, but you all know what I'm talking about. I haven't really read any of those yet, so I don't have anything to compare it to, but this seems like a very interesting take on it. We are centering a character that literally is just forgotten in the original story and also punished for sins which are not her own. And there's this mishmashy of time and place and everything in here that was like, what the crap is going on for a lot of the book, but in a good way. Yeah, I did really enjoy it. I'm not as much like dying to run out and get his other books as I was with like Maggie O'Farrell, but I would definitely still be interested in reading his other work based on this experience. If you're interested in reading this one, I do highly recommend. There is stuff in it. I mean, if you know the story of Pericles, then you're probably well aware of what that stuff is. There is essay of a child in it. So, trigger warning, I guess. But that goes way back in the myth, and you can tell that in this one he was like, F that, let's let's do something about it. It's real nice reading authors that I previously enjoyed because so far I'm learning that I enjoy them. Been a good round of books so far. There's a lot of characters in this book. At a certain point, I was like, I gotta stop trying to keep them straight. I can't anymore. But also, y'all, ooh, I liked this one more than Jazz. A lot more, quite frankly, because Jazz was good. I read it and I was like, ooh, this is a good writer. Like, this is a skilled storyteller. But this one was just like, oh God. She reveals information so slowly. Not in a way where you're like, oh my God, this book is so slow, can you speed it up? But in like a mysterious way where you're like, I have to keep reading, please give me more information. And it's weird to use the term unreliable narrator because it's not in first person, which I think is when that usually is applied, that like, somebody's telling your story, somebody's telling you their story, and they are not reliable. This is in third person, but it very much flits from one person's specific thoughts and opinions and worldviews and memories to another. Like, to all of them. There's so many characters. And all of them are unreliable narrators, which is so fascinating. So you're really getting all of these different perspectives, and you're never sure who you're supposed to believe or whose side you're supposed to be on. And then you realize at a certain point that, like, I shouldn't be on anyone's side, really. I should just be intaking the story because none of these people are, like, I don't want to be on any of their sides. I just need to look and listen and hear their story. It actually has some interesting similarities to 100 Years of Solitude, which I did not realize or like didn't click in my head until I had fully finished the book last night. But like the vast number of characters with a lot of shared names that you have to weed through in your head. This small town in the middle of nowhere that's very isolated from everyone else and sort of this history of it. And then also magical realism. You don't really realize when you start the book, it kind of comes in slowly that there is magical realism in it. Kind of, I guess. That's what I would call it, at least. Because there's all these little things that happen that you keep going like, oh, maybe that's going to get explained. And it doesn't. I think you should very much be prepared in this one for stuff to not be explained. The ending does not explain stuff, but that's okay. I loved it. I thought it was incredibly good. I was enthralled the entire time. And yeah, once again, just making me want to read more of her works. One more to go, kinda. I ended up getting Alias Grace. It was kind of coincidence that when I was halfway through this little set of reading guidelines, this reading category I'm doing at the moment, I guess, I happened to be going to a bunch of bookstores, and I saw this one, and it's just like normal sized. All of the other versions of this book I'd seen were like twice as big, and I don't care how long a book is, but if it's incredibly chunky, it hurts to hold it up, you know? I don't know if it's just my hands or what, but after like reading for an hour or two, your hands just get tired of holding it up. So if I see a book with like really small print that's a little more manageable in size, I'm more likely to go for it. But ultimately, this one just felt like not really a good enough comparison or like, you know, a good enough second chance. It's pretty small, and I figured I'd be able to read it fast. I did still read it, and it was fast. It took me like 2 quick sittings to finish it. So between the two of them, and in comparison with The Blind Assassin, which I've already read by Margaret Atwood, the standout feature of her books, at least of what I've read so far, is that none of them are normal. She doesn't seem like one to just write a typical narrative story. There's always something different going on. And this one, not only is the narrative style interesting, but she also has these inserts by like a Greek chorus. In this one, it's not a true story, but it's based on some true stuff. So she has all of these inserts that are the actual historical documents that she was getting information from, but also poetry, and then the writing itself is not only two different forms of narrative, but also utilizes letters. So, like, this seems to be the Margaret Atwood thing, that she's gonna have some sort of unique, interesting writing style, some way of telling you the story that is not typical per se, which I always love to see. I love creativity in storytelling. So as far as like, did I like them? The Penelopiad, I don't know why this is such a tongue twister for me. It was interesting. I thought it was an interesting take on the Odysseus Penelope relationship. It wasn't the super unexpected take for me. I do wonder with some of these if they were a bit more unexpected when she originally wrote them, and we're just at a point now where people always play off of what other people have done before. Because kind of both of these books, I found that the ending didn't really surprise me. I was like, yeah, of course that was where we were going. But also, like, I recognize that that might be because of the time that has happened since they were written and the things that have been written since then, you know? It was really interesting, though. It was interesting the way that she chose to tell it, and it's a really short read. And then Alias Grace, not so much a short read. Yeah, like I said, it's based off of some actual events. I do always enjoy reading her books and learning more about Canada. 'Cause y'all, we in America do not learn about Canada. I mean, we don't learn about many other countries, but like especially for some reason, you'd think we're neighbors, we would learn something about the history of Canada. We really don't. Or at least I didn't. Not everybody's education is the same. But yeah, I enjoyed it. I think like Margaret Atwood's writing style is so incredibly good that reading her books, I'm like, I'm always enjoying it because this is good writing. I will say I didn't find this story as compelling in general. It was a little bit slow, which again is balanced by how good her writing is. So if it was this kind of slow story and bad writing, I would have been like, oh my god, get me out of here. But when it's sort of a slower story and really good writing, then I don't know, you just kind of get in it and you're like, I trust that it's going to go somewhere. I did reach a point where I was kind of expecting there to be this really incredible twist ending or reveal or something, because that's kind of how Blind Assassin was. Blind Assassin like slapped you across the face when you got to the end and it was like, aha! This one, not so much. I guess there was sort of that reveal at the end, but it was pretty expected for me. And so I was like, yeah. That seems like where we were going. Overall, though, still just really enjoyable because she is such a good writer. She's so skilled with words, and she's so skilled with this creative storytelling. So I definitely do want to read more of her stuff. I'm interested now to actually read The Handmaid's Tale. I have never watched the show because it's not something that I would really enjoy watching. But I read the script for the pilot of the show, because that's something I do quite often when it's a show I know I'm not going to watch. I'll go read the script. But now that every book that I've read of Margaret Atwood's had this like creative storytelling, it's making me wonder if Handmaid's Tale also has something like that. Is it just narrative, like typical first-person narrative, or is it something more unusual? But yeah, y'all, overall, lightning can strike twice. Absolutely, I enjoyed every single book that I just read here, which I suppose is lightly unsurprising, but also you never really know. Some people write drastically different books. I think Mark Haddon's was the most different, and then I do think my favorite out of this entire stack was Maggie O'Farrell's. I honestly can't really voice why that book moved me so much. And it's not like the story by itself, and it's not the way that she told the story by itself. It is the combo of those two things, but I absolutely loved that one. This was a really fun challenge. This was a really great category for a bit of reading, and really an enjoyable couple months that I've spent over these few books. Highly recommend if you're not sure what to read next. Maybe look back at what you've read before and see, is there an author you loved once, but you've never given a second chance to whom you have never given a second chance to be grammatically correct. Maybe go for that.